And we're back, folks. Week 16, the fantasy championships. We've made it a grueling gauntlet of a season, and I'm a wreck. I'm an absolute wreck at this point. I have a tight end decision that I was talking before the show that just I can't even believe I have to make this decision. But enough about me. This is about us. This is about winning a championship this week, and you've been here for the whole ride, and we're going to get you to that end, get you to that promised land, and let you hoist that trophy. This week, with me, Jimmy Clausen's biggest fan, Scott Spratt, and, of course, the incomparable Pat Thorman. Scott, let's start with you. In what world does it make sense that Jimmy Clausen is starting in Week 16?
I'd say maybe a really fun fantasy world. I'm pretty excited about it, actually. It's kind of like Christmas come early for me.
The Bears are surely putting the fantasy in fantasy this week, because this makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. But, hey, there's a lot of opportunity there, Pat, especially in DFS this week. We see two bare minimum quarterbacks, Jimmy Clausen, Case Keenum. And, yeah, they're not going to light the world up. It's not going to be like that Fitzmagic situation a couple weeks back where he was the minimum price and he put up a ton of points. But there's value to be had there. There's value to be had elsewhere. Pat, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. You know, it's like you said, I'm kind of a wreck. There's a lot going on. But we're going to kind of push right through the finish here and get people their championships.
That we are. That's what it's all about, getting to those fantasy championships. And there's going to be a ton of questions on the slate so far. But, Scott, you were looking at some of the news, Julio Jones, a couple other players. Why don't you get people filled in on what you've been observing across the wire so far this morning, a lot of the news coming in right now?
Yeah, the things people may have missed from earlier are that both LeGarrette Blount and Julian Edelman are ruled out for the Patriots. That means maybe in deeper formats, Danny Amendola may be an option there. Jonas Gray will probably be the primary between the tackles running for the Patriots. For deep league players, Dwayne Bowe is active. Julio Jones, big name there, is active. Let's see. I think D'Angelo Williams is going to be active, but is not necessarily going to get a lot of touches today. Let's see. I think that's everybody that I've seen so far, but I'll keep butting in when I come up with guys that I see come up as active that are important.
And seeing Joe Hayden is also going to be inactive here. That's an upgrade for Kelvin Benjamin in a game where remarkably Cam Newton is starting. Let's get right into the questions. If you're watching this on the YouTube feed, remember you can hit us up with the hashtag War Room. We're going to do our best. This is a marathon jammed into a sprint in 26 minutes here to get to everybody's questions. And we're going to start right off with some of these dilemmas. Obviously, DeMarco Murray playing. Obviously, Julio Jones playing, but in what capacity? So W. Wet has a question for us regarding this. Harry Douglas, what are our thoughts and expectations for him? Is Julio Jones going to be more of a decoy? Matt Asiata, obviously in a really strong matchup against the Dolphins. And Shane Vereen, who looks to see an uptick very likely in those underneath targets with Edelman out, with LeGarrette Blount out. So his ultimate thing is, what do you think about these changes? Is there any way that you fade Julio Jones and DeMarco Murray today, Pat?
Not for those choices. Both of them think they're going to give it a go. They've both gone through walkthroughs. DeMarco might have a few fewer catches with the cast on his hand. And so you want to downgrade your expectations for them, but I mean they've got you to the finals. They're going to give it a go, unless you have sterling options. And Douglas, it wouldn't be one of them. With Julio in there, I do like Vereen, but I would certainly go with DeMarco over him. You kind of got to ride those two studs with the information we have.
What do you think, Scott?
The penalty that I gave Murray was that I dropped him to number 8 in my running back rankings, so not much of a penalty at all. I think his backups may be a legit option in very deep leagues, maybe in the 40 to 45 range, but I'm going to go with Murray unless my option is someone like Mark Ingram, so I have a very deep roster there. And with Julio, I think you have to roll with him too. I don't think that necessarily means that Harry Douglas can't be a viable option, but I definitely would rather start Julio ahead of Douglas there if those were the two I was choosing between.
Yeah, I think you guys make great points here, and you're actually really fortunate to have some action in this game. This New Orleans-Atlanta game Vegas loves it. Lots and lots of yardage looks like going to be on the slate for this game. So you want to get in where you can. Douglas is going to be viable here, but again, if Julio Jones is playing, this is an important game. This is a playoff game, basically. So if he's out there, you have to expect that he's capable of being out there. He's not just going to be that decoy, and you got to go with him. So I do agree with your take there. Let's move over to Austin's question here, and he says thanks for helping him. Hey, you did all the work. We're just here for the ride. As I always say, without you guys, thank you guys. Thank everybody who's reading our stuff, who's tweeting us, who's watching this on YouTube, because without you, we're just a bunch of fantasy nerds who are talking to each other, talking to ourselves. So thank you, Austin, and congratulations for reaching that championship. But he has, in a standard league, Scott, he has a choice between Andre Johnson, Torrey Smith, Julio Jones, Harry Douglas. He needs to sit one of those players, and he has Crowell in his flex. Do any of the players possibly bump up whoever he's sitting above Crowell in that flex spot for you, Scott?
I'm one of the few guys that's still really high on Crowell. I have him as a running back 2 again this week, and part of it I think is just matchup. The Browns are playing the Panthers, a team that has given up some really long runs this year. Crowell is a guy that gets a lot of his fantasy points on big plays. I think that could really work well for him. So I would actually keep Crowell in that spot, and then I think I would just go with Julio Jones there too. And I know that there's an injury risk, but I think he's just so much better, so much more upside than his other plays that I would stick with him here.
So who are you sitting out of that group?
Let's see. So the other 2 were
Andre Johnson, Torrey Smith, Julio Jones, Harry Douglas.
Yeah, I think I would probably sit Torrey Smith. There's a guy that you're kind of relying on the touchdown there, maybe a little bit lower. I think Douglas could probably get a lot of work in the slot today against some mediocre coverage linebackers in New Orleans. So I think I would sit Torrey Smith.
What do you think, Pat?
I'm actually, this might be non-traditional, but I would sit Andre Johnson. I mean, like Scott just said, Douglas is still going to get some work. Plus, he also helps cover Julio. So if Julio does, leave in the first quarter, then you got Harry Douglas in there, who's probably a better choice than all the rest of those receivers. Andre Johnson is dealing with Case Keenum. Now there's news that DeAndre Hopkins is going to play, so it takes a little bit of volume away from him. I just don't trust him against that defense. I don't think they're going to maintain possessions. Andre is a volume receiver at this point. He's not a guy who gets touchdowns. And if he doesn't get that volume, you're going to be left holding the bag. Torrey Smith is going against the secondary that's vulnerable. They're going to have the ball quite a bit. I wouldn't be surprised if he pops one today. So it's a little bit dicey, but Andre Johnson just does not do it for me today.
Yeah, it's a tough
and as
situation.
Pat mentioned,
Go ahead, Scott.
As Pat mentioned, DeAndre Hopkins has been ruled active. Meanwhile, D'Angelo Williams has been ruled inactive. That actually makes Jonathan Stewart a viable running back 2 today for anybody that's looking for a last-minute fill-in at running back.
And it makes him an intriguing DFS play. Absolutely not to give away too many of my lineup plays this week, but he's going to be in some GPP lineups, that's for sure. So good news there for Stewart owners in that RB2 area. And yeah, this is a tough choice because both Torrey Smith and Andre Johnson offer low ceilings. The lesser of 2 evils for me is Andre Johnson. I'm with Scott on this one. I am going to sit Torrey Smith there. Probably roll with Crowell just because it's a standard league in that flex spot. So good luck to you, Austin. On to Eric's question. Assuming DeMarco Murray is active, he's going to be active. There's no assumption there. Do we start him over Mark Ingram? And this is interesting because this is something you actually said a moment ago, Scott. You're starting Mark Ingram over DeMarco Murray from what it sounds like. So, Pat, toss this over to you first, and then, Scott, your rebuttal. What do you think about this particular dilemma?
It's close, and I'm going to have them, right next to each other in my final rankings. But I do agree with Scott here. I think Ingram is the safer play. You're dealing with a Colts team that doesn't have anything to play for today. So if Dallas jumps up on him, which is very possible, they're going to take it easy on Murray. They have viable alternatives in the backfield. They'll be able to move the ball through the air as well. So Ingram is the safer play, and he's got an excellent matchup as well against Atlanta's awful run defense. So I think I'll give Ingram higher. I currently do, and I think that's the way it's going to be.
What do you think, Scott?
I pretty much agree with Pat there. And again, that's not a criticism of Murray necessarily. I have Ingram at 7 and Murray at 8, so those guys are both sort of in the elite range among backs. But I just think you're much safer here with Ingram. He's been getting a consistent workload, playing a bad run defense. Just a little bit safer in my mind.
One of the things you can potentially do is you can look to see what Vegas thinks. I mean, we do it often with over-unders, but a lot of people forget about the player prop bets. And, you know, if you look at the prop bet for this week for Ingram, his over-under is at 70 yards rushing, 70 and a half yards. So that's pretty solid. You have to like that. It's pretty much even money either way. But he's a favorite to score a touchdown. Vegas likes him to score a touchdown in this game. You really have to like that high floor. Against this volatile, dangerous play, I'm agreeing. It's Ingram. It's close. It's super close, but I'm going to go with Ingram there as well. And the other question he had, Sammy Watkins or Josh Gordon. Josh Gordon, can we see a rebound from Johnny Manziel or go in a different direction with Johnny Manziel this week? Against the Panthers defense, Scott, that can struggle at times, doesn't necessarily have that pass rush. The Charles Johnson's doing a lot better over the last few weeks. Obviously, Luke Kuechly's still there, but that secondary is suspect. So what do you think about this dilemma, Scott?
I completely agree with what you said there, Jeff. I don't trust the cornerbacks for the Panthers. The pass rush has been getting better, but the Browns do have a fairly decent offensive line. I think I would go with Gordon there. I know he hasn't performed as well in fantasy the last couple of weeks, but I still have him as sort of a mid-range wide receiver too, higher than a lot of people probably. So I think I would stick with him there.
Pat?
I would personally go with Watkins. I think it's kind of a safety versus upside decision here. I mean, if you have a solid matchup, if you're confident in how you look in your matchup, Sam Watkins is going to get a pretty solid floor relative to Josh Gordon. I mean, you watched that game last week. They had nothing going on in the passing game. Johnny Manziel, I mean, he has all the potential in the world, but he's not there now. And you can see why they didn't play him, even though Boyer was one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. Gordon, he can certainly turn a 5-yard, pitch into an 80-yard touchdown, and that's what you're looking for if you want the upside. But if you want a safe floor, and I would go with Sammy Watkins.
Yeah, and the game just looks too big for Johnny Manziel at this point. Doing some of the stuff that he was doing in college, we saw, that goofy throwing off the 1 foot in that awkward angle last week, and sure, that works. Even in the SEC, that can work. It's not going to work when every guy on the field is faster than you are, so we'll see here. I don't like that play at all. I'm going with Sammy Watkins there. Tough quarterback dilemma. Eli Manning, okay, coming off an impressive game, but it was really a game that was Odell Beckham Jr., and in a very tough matchup against a Rams team that hasn't yielded a touchdown in the last 3 weeks. That's really impressive. And then you have, on the other side, Alex Smith going up against a Steelers team that gives up passing yards, touchdowns, you name it, in bunches, but he doesn't have a receiver. He has nobody. Well, he has Dwayne Bowe. So he doesn't have a receiver. He's got some running backs, obviously, and he certainly has a tight end who's explosive, but this is close. Pat, what do you do if you're facing Alex Smith, Eli Manning decision? What are you doing there?
I am going Alex Smith, and I'm fairly confident about that one. It should be there should be plenty of points in that Pittsburgh Kansas City game, and Pittsburgh's defense is not even in the same ballpark as the Rams. Eli lit up the Redskins last week, but I mean the Redskins' pass defense is the Redskins' pass defense. Giants' offensive line is not good. The Rams bring the heat. Eli, you look at another 3 turnover game for Eli. I don't like the spot at all for him. I'm solid on Alex Smith's side on this.
And the Redskins' pass defense is the Redskins' pass defense until Rashad Breeland picks off Mark Sanchez with the game on the line, Eagles. Anyway, the Eagles fan in me coming out. Scott, what are you doing there?
I agree with that. It's actually not that close in my mind. Keep in mind that for the year, Eli's only outscored Alex Smith by 25 fantasy points. So they're not really that far apart to begin with. And then you add in the fact that there's an extremely positive matchup for Smith and extremely negative for Eli, and I think you have to go Smith there.
Yeah, I do agree. Really hope as Odell Beckham today, but yeah, that's the safer play. I'm going to agree with you guys there. Latavius Murray, a player who's been coming up a lot, obviously massive ceiling, but equally low floor on that team against a really tough defense, a really tough Buffalo defense. or Boom Herron, who's essentially splitting time with Trent Richardson. Scott, if you're trying to decide between those two in a PPR, who are you going with?
I mean, it is probably close, but I actually have Heron a little bit ahead, even in standard formats. He is splitting time, but he's getting quite a bit of work through the passing game as well. I think that raises his floor and makes him a little bit safer there.
What do you think, Pat?
Yeah, I agree. Dallas defense is not very good against the run. It looks like T.Y. Hilton's probably going to miss the game. They're going to take it easy on Reggie Wayne. I think that boosts Heron's floor a little bit. The Bills have been giving up, yards on the ground in the last handful of weeks, but they were playing teams that can pass the ball. Oakland can't pass the ball, so I don't see Murray as big of an upside play as we've heard this week. I think the Bills should be able to clamp down. They're playing for playoffs. I mean, how often does that happen in Week 16? So I don't see it as a letdown spot for Buffalo and Oakland today, and I'm not on Murray very much at all.
Yeah, the game script doesn't seem to set up very well for Murray today. I mean, you love the electric upside. More intriguing from a dynasty standpoint at this point, and yeah, if you're playing that higher floor, it's going to be Heron. Eddie's asking for IDP sleepers. Good luck. Nick Moody, he played yesterday. Will Compton, he played yesterday. I think if I have to come up with one who would probably be available, even in deep leagues, my vote would go towards Kelvin Shepherd. He's very likely going to start today with Jelani Jenkins still banged up. He's probably going to play in that every down role, though Koemisi will be back this week. He played well last week, surprisingly enough. So I would throw a dart at him. It's a tough week for IDP. It's a tough season for IDP. So hopefully you've got somebody else that you can roll with there. I've seen a lot of leagues though where strange people like DeQuell Jackson, Curtis Lofton, guys like that are on waiver wires. That blows my mind right now, especially given the present state of things. So if that's a situation for you, maybe you might be able to grab somebody like that. So good luck to you there, Eddie. Chris has a question about Martellus Bennett. Is he going to be competent this week with Jimmy Clausen in at quarterback, Scott?
It's kind of tough to forecast. We haven't really seen him play the position in 4 years. What I remember from his early Panthers days were that he was very inaccurate on his short passes and had bad touch, would often throw the ball too hard. But I think I am going to roll with Bennett. I think I penalized pretty much every Chicago player a little bit, Forte especially with the short dump off passes. But Bennett may get a benefit too from Clausen being more quick with the trigger. So I think I would play Bennett as sort of a mid-tier tight end one this week, even though I'm nervous about it.
Pat, agree?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, besides the upper crust of tight ends, you're kind of looking at all, you're hoping for a touchdown for the most part. Bennett's one of those guys that, like Scott said, you'll be able to get a handful of targets to him. Your alternatives probably aren't that great, unless it's one of the Colts tight ends or Kelsey. I don't really see anyone that would be available have a better game than Bennett.
All right, 11 minutes left in the show. We're choosing a flex spot between Julio Jones, Trey Mason, Jeremy Hill, or Lamar Miller. Really interesting names here. Scott, is this automatic for you in a standard league? Are you starting Julio Jones here? Obviously, he's the name if he was 100% healthy. Or do you go with one of the running backs?
It's close. So of the running backs, Trey Mason is the one that I have the highest. I think that probably has mostly to do with the matchup. But, yeah, I don't know. I probably would go with Mason. But, man, yeah. Jones is who I want to start because he obviously has the highest upside. Okay, I'll say Jones, but it's really close. What do you think?
What do you think, Pat?
I would go with Mason. You're in the championship here. You don't want to get yourself knocked out, with a 0 with Julio. If he goes out there and something goes wrong in the first quarter, you're going to get a 0. Mason has got pretty guaranteed volume today and a good game script as a favorite against the Giants' run defense that, although they haven't been tested the last couple of weeks, is not good. And I do have Mason higher of those 3 running backs, all of which have a pretty good forecast this week. But it's Mason for me.
Yeah, and I'm almost having to toss Jeremy Hill. I mean, I like the fact that he's probably going to see the volume, but that Broncos run defense is a lot better than I think people are giving him credit for. So, yeah, I agree with it's Trey Mason for me. And it really comes down to the fact that I think we could see a lot of touches out of him with Jeff Fisher trying to control this game. The Rams don't quit. They are the best 7-9 team in the league every year almost, it seems like, at least. And Dallas is usually the best 8-8 team, but not this year. So yeah, I'm going to agree with you there. Now, again, Matt, you're asking about Julio Jones or Josh Gordon. It's obvious it's Julio Jones there for all of us. I think that's the consensus here. If he's playing, you're starting him. But in a standard league for Rob, we have Emmanuel Sanders, the whole illness narrative in Denver seeming to continue forever here. Brandon LaFell, Kenny Stills. He also picked up Mohamed Sanu. I don't like Sanu at all in that matchup. That is a brutal matchup for Sanu, seeing Chris Harris. No thank you whatsoever. So starting two out of those, Scott, who are you going with? And then Pat, follow up when Scott's done.
Well, LaFell's the obvious yes. With Edelman out, LaFell's going to be the clear number one wide receiver there. So I think LaFell is definitely a safe play. And I think that if I'm understanding the question is that he has the option of starting Sanders, but then if for whatever reason Sanders misses and he's sick right now, he would then have to play Sanu as the backup as the other Monday night option that he has. But still, I think that Sander is likely enough to play, and I like him so much better than the alternatives there that I think I'm just going to roll with Sanders and hope that he starts and then play Sanu if I have to. It's a little bit of a risk there, Pat, but do you think that's what makes the most sense?
Absolutely. He's been talking about the flu for a day plus now, and so he's probably had it since Thursday or Friday. They're playing Monday night. These guys are in good shape. I would imagine he's going to be over his flu by Monday night. His upside is enormous. So it's Manuel Sanders and it's LaFell for me. Stills might get a little bit of Trufant this weekend, and that would be the one bad matchup in that entire game, which is going to be a fantasy fest, fantasy points fest. So I'm a little bit down on Stills this week, especially relative to Colston, who runs out of the slot and will have a better matchup.
Yeah, I just like everybody in that game. 320 yards is what Vegas has the over-under at Drew Brees. So, boy, oh boy, there's going to be a lot to go around. But, yeah, just given the fact, the present state of the Patriots, I do agree. It's close between LaFell and Stills, but LaFell gets the edge there. And, yeah, absolutely risking it, rolling the dice, and at least you have that Sanu card in your pocket if you need it with Sanders in case he is somehow inactive. The other question he has here is about Dante Moncrief, and we have Charles Johnson, Moncrief, or Martavius Bryant. Moncrief's a really interesting name here, given the fact that it looks like T.Y. Hilton isn't going to be active. I mean, that's not official, but that's really what it's leaning towards. That's been what everybody's expecting all week long. So we'll see an uptick there, certainly in a high over-under game. Pat, what are your thoughts and expectations for Moncrief here? Is he an automatic start out of that bunch for you?
Absolutely, and especially in daily. I mean, his price is really cheap. You can make a lot of nice lineups with him fit in there. Without Hilton, they could probably take it easy on Wayne as well. Like we mentioned before, they really can't, get anything out of this game as far as playoff seeding. All the targets really go to the tight ends and Moncrief. They'll run a lot of 12 personnel. Moncrief is got a pretty big ceiling this week. Now, Charles Johnson's probably a safer shot. He'll get his. He's the X there. He'll get his. But it's Moncrief for me for sure.
What do you think, Scott?
I actually have Johnson and Moncrief 2 spots apart before making any decision on Hilton. So I think they're close enough together that you want to go with Moncrief for the upside, because if Hilton misses, which we think he will, then all of a sudden he's a clear top 30 and maybe better wide receiver.
Yeah, I certainly agree there. And, I'm looking, keeping an eye, if you're watching on the YouTube feed, remember we are keeping an eye here on Twitter. Questions coming fast and furious, 5 minutes left, but one of the questions that we need to address here, and it's a big theme, is with Julio Jones active, what is the impact on Roddy White? Obviously, White, not the player he once was, more of a, moving the chains type player right now. But, Pat, how much does this downgrade Roddy White for you today?
I don't think it downgrades him too much. I mean, Douglas was so involved last week. I mean, he had 14 targets. So and White still kind of got his. So I put him. I'm pretty much the same on Roddy, whether Julio plays or not. I mean, if anything, it might help him a little bit. You might get a little more attention over to Julio than you would have if it was Harry Douglas. But I'm still pretty bullish on Roddy White. And like you said, he is what he is at this point. He's not a wide receiver 1, but he's a pretty solid wide receiver 2, especially in PPR leagues.
All right, coming down the home stretch, 4 minutes left in the show. Before we get the show on the road, half-point PPR, Harry Douglas, Doug Martin, Danny Amendola, Chris Ivory, and we need a flex play out of them, Scott. Quick.
I'll go with Harry Douglas there. I wouldn't get too excited about Amendola just because he's playing. Again, the Patriots have a lot of options, so I think Douglas is the safe play there.
Pat?
Yeah, I agree with that, and I also agree with Amendola. I mean, I'm going to make a GPP lineup with him in there, just to kind of throw that out there. But like Scott said, they have a ton of ways to make and go with the ball.
All right, Eric has a question. Between Jeremy Hill, we just talked about Matt Forte in a brutal matchup with Jimmy Clausen as quarterback, and Matt Asiata in a really good matchup. But remember, all of those big games happen in Minnesota. Now, this is a game in Miami. You gotta sit one of those, Scott. Who you sitting?
Let's see. Don't sit Matt Forte. I'll give you that to start with. And then the other two I think are pretty close, but I'll probably go with Jeremy Hill. I know it's not a great matchup there, but I think I would play him over Asiata.
Pat?
Yeah, I agree with that. And Jeff, maybe you could talk about the Broncos linebacker injuries. I know they're still a good run defense, no doubt, but what are they dealing with there?
Your guess is as good as mine. With Brandon Marshall, he's out for 2 weeks. Well, he may miss the entire playoffs. This is a nasty little injury that he got. That Liz Frank injury doesn't bode positively for players getting back on the field quickly. Danny Trevathan gone, so that means Steve Johnson, Corey Nelson, Lamin Barrow, and Todd Davis. I think I went to high school with that guy. I don't know. I really think that, obviously Von Miller is going to see a little bit more, sort of uptick in tackles. Does this bode well for the run? It could. It really could. But they're going to have to get past that that defensive line first. It's close. I think I do lean Hill here, though, and I agree with Scott. You can't sit Forte, so you're going to dance with your date there. Need one out of Boom Herron, Andre Williams, and Jonathan Stewart. Very quickly, Pat.
Jonathan Stewart, he's going to get a bigger workload than Boone.
Scott?
Yeah, Stewart with D'Angelo out. I'll go with Stewart.
I agree. And obviously, we're coming down the stretch here. Just wanted to thank everybody for a great season. We will not be back next week. You shouldn't be playing in Week 17. Should you take the week off, relax, enjoy the sometimes meaningless games of Week 17, but we will be back for the playoffs. We're going to have extensive playoff content, so those of you in playoff leagues, whether it's sort of daily format where you're salary capping, whether you go out and you draft teams, hey, we're in leagues like that, all of us as well. We're going to be back with content. We'll do some shows as well. So wishing everybody the best of luck, hoping you all hoist that trophy this week. And give us a cut of your wings. No, I kid. Best of luck, though. Enjoy the games. So for Pro Football Focus Fantasy, for Scott Spratt, for Pat Thorman, I'm Jeff Ratcliffe signing off.